Merced County's news voice since 1936. News Talk 1480, KYOS, Merced.
Greetings from the KYOS News Desk. We are joined once again this week by Merced County Sheriff Mark Pazin. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you very much. What's
Hey,
going
real
on?
quick, how did you enjoy the grand marshaling duties for MLK Parade? Was that everything you hoped it would be?
It was. It was a nice event. It was a long day, but it was well worth it. Myself, Bishop Dwight Amy, and Chevrolet dealership owner Will Dean were the co-grand marshals. And it was a very exquisite. It just shows you, it kind of reinvigorates you, and I'm going to tell you why. You hear about all the bad things that happen with kids and gangs and drugs and bullies, and then you go to an event on Martin Luther King Day, and you had just the opposite. You had young folks that can sing, dance. You had adults that were absolutely engaged in their upbringing and their positive behavior. And it really does reinvigorate you after it's all said and done. My day is consumed by all the negativity that happens here, not only in Merced County, and obviously not statewide anymore, but now in the national scene. I'm sure we'll segue into that. But it is 40 plus hours of just having to deal with all the crooks and all the wild dogs that inhabit our community. But then to go and be on stage with just good folks, it's
Right.
it's nice.
I think you made a very valid point there about involvement.
Yeah.
Having parents being involved in their children's lives. That's the main thing.
It was unfortunate. There are single family homes, but there were persons there that want to do the right thing, as far as school teachers, as far as individual. I forget his name. He played the guitar like in the second hour of us being there. He had retired, and he comes back every year to play for these kids. So again, you have adults. I thought his Lance. Was it Mr. Lance, I think, came back. Though he's retired, he still participates in helping these children by playing songs with them. So
Sure.
it was really great.
Yeah, and it, invigorating.
Yes.
Recharges the spirit.
It does.
Yeah,
It does.
that's
It
good.
gets you to the soul. It gets to the spirit. It gets to the actual aspect that, regardless of what I see 40, 50 hours a week here for that day, those 4 hours, starting from the start of the parade to the end of the event, there was good, positive aura.
Right.
The kismet was there, and it was a good day.
Well, as much as I'd like to keep our conversation positive,
Okay.
obviously the hot topic in the news right now is the assault, the Feinstein assault weapon ban and the
Right.
Second Amendment rights and that whole morass. You and I have talked about this. Last week we talked about it a little bit.
A little bit, a lot.
A lot, right? What do you think about what's going on right now?
I think, again, I'll stand by my original comment. It's political theater. A lot of the executive orders that were placed and written are already implemented here in California. I think people have become more polarized over this issue than what's going on with the actual fiscal recovery. And I want to explain in very great detail, because I know both pros and cons of this gun issue are going to get riled up, because there is no happy medium on this. There is absolutely not.
Is there a happy medium on anything in politics?
Not anymore. I was reading USA Today about liars, fakers, and what was the other one? Cheaters, and that was Beyonce. We're more consumed about Beyonce lip syncing.
I know.
We are more consumed about Lance Armstrong. If you didn't think he was doping, then I guess who's the dope? And this Manti Teo, who had an imaginary girlfriend.
It turned out to be a dude.
It's crazy.
I know.
So here we have really two topics of national impact: gun rights and the fiscal economy and jobs, wherein the state of California is still in double-digit figures for unemployment. Merced County, for heaven's sake, is like 18%.
Yeah.
But we're worried about
The lead story is whether or not Beyonce lip synced the national anthem.
exactly, or that Lance Armstrong fell on
Exactly.
a sword that we knew that he. You can't win that seven
could not
times
agree
in a
more.
row, and that he was a big bully. Okay, we'll accept that. And this Manti Teo is, who knows what he is? Is he a loon? I mean, a
Naive.
great football player, but
Yeah.
good grief! If now it's going on for 4 years that he had this imaginary friend.
I guess. Like I said, I'm not interested in that kind of stuff.
Well,
when I turn on the news and I see the lead story is whether or not Beyonce lip synced the national anthem, I turn it.
Yeah.
If I see whether or not Lance Armstrong cheated while he was in the Tour de France, I turn it.
Right.
I'm not interested in that stuff. I don't, it can be summed up in 30 seconds to me, and then I'm ready to move on to the next topic.
It reminds me of, help me out with this. I know my mom will be listening. I wish she could call in. But there was an old TV movie, I think with Jimmy Stewart, regarding his imaginary friend, the rabbit. Was it Harvey?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I do
Okay,
recall
so
that.
that's what it reminds me of. This Manti Teo is the Jimmy Stewart of our time. Instead of a rabbit, he's got an imaginary girlfriend. And that's national news. So let's get back to the at hand, what's going on here. Again, it is, I can't say this enough, how unfortunate what happened. Young children lost their lives in Newtown, Connecticut. You had a person that snapped. He had access to guns. His mother was trying to do the right thing. For heaven's sakes, she's dead. She should not be ostracized for having guns in her house, thinking at the time she was doing the right thing to bond with her kid. Did she know he may have been haywired a bit or a lot, depending on what story you're going to listen to?
Do we know anything about that? I mean, has there been any backstory as far as his mental? Was he being treated for anything? Was he on any type of...
Steve, I haven't read anything
haven't
about
either.
it. But see, that gets into another point of all these files are confidential. But who in their right mind, and let's just digress for just a moment. Look what's going on over here. People lie regarding lip syncing, imaginary girlfriend, and doping. What family member is going to want to stand up and say, my son or daughter has mental illness and we need to do something? It's one of those closet topics that you don't bring to the forefront. So here's what happens. Is exactly what did happen. You have persons that really need the help that either can't get it, had help for a little bit, but then are off their medications, okay? So now being a gun owner has become the reason this incident happened. And I have to take great exception to that. The Constitution was built around the Second Amendment, and I firmly believe in that. I know that I'm getting a lot of emails, where do you stand on this? Let me say for the record, unequivocally, I believe in the Second Amendment. Some of these executive orders, I think, are, again, political theater because we're already implementing this. Do we need a school resource officer? Of course. Whether you have one or not is financially driven. You cannot have, even though I admire persons that are trying to volunteer to protect a school, that's very reactionary. I think you'll have more issues prospectively than trying to save an entire school. We need trained law enforcement.
It brings up an interesting point. Is I was just reading also that the California state legislature has seen fit to hire 150 new California Highway Patrol officers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just would that money not be better spent to put police officers on on the ground to fight crime versus putting traffic control officers on the road? I mean, I understand that a traffic control officer like a CHP is a revenue generator for the state. I mean, they go out and write 10 tickets a day. They're bringing in money to the revenue to the state. Whereas somebody that's out walking a crime beat doesn't necessarily do that. But is that a wise distribution of resources to hire 150 new California highway patrolmen to patrol our highways versus 150 boots on the ground, so to speak, that you could maybe apply towards a resource officer that could be at a school?
I know Joe Farrow. He's the commissioner of Highway Patrol. Good
Okay.
friend of mine. When you attach that word new highway patrol officers, you should really put replaced highway patrol officers because they're not new. There was, because of this new, and then we're going to get off into a different topic, because of the pension reform, there was a number of persons that retired, so they're just trying to keep status quo as far as filling in.
But couldn't you make that same argument towards the sheriff's department or the city police department that they need people to be replaced?
True story, but see, here's what's happening. You have to bifurcate the issues. First off, you have school districts. School districts get X number of dollars. If they want to apply some of those funds towards a school resource officer, like I hope they will now, that's up to them. That's up to the Board of Trustees, whether it's Delhi, LeGrand, Planada, Merced, wherever you want to go. And because of the fiscal crisis, I mean, just an absolute spiral into the ground, they had to pick and choose teachers or a cop on the school grounds. They chose teachers. I can accept that. We still have Joey Cardenas up at Delhi, who does a great job as a, he was full-time, retired. Now we brought him back as a retired annuitant, as a deputy sheriff, extra help. Same thing over in LeGrand. My point being here is that people are getting really wrapped up in some of these executive orders. Okay, how does, and I'm going to go through one of them that just screeches out at you, nominate an ATF director. That was an executive order. How does that?
ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms?
Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They've had an interim director for some time now. What's the impact on that? You go to proposed rulemaking to give law enforcement the ability to run a full background check on an individual before returning a seized gun. We do that already, okay?
Just in the state or nationwide?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I think what's happened here, and that's a very good observation, we are doing, it's almost like the vice president reviewed what we're doing here in California, says, hey, look, I just invented fire and the internet. Look, we have put these items on the table, and it's like they did something, but we're already doing it here. The one issue that could or could not have some impact is a presidential memorandum directing the Centers for Disease Control to research the causes and prevention of gun violence. Okay, how's that impact the Second Amendment? Now, and that's what I'm asking everybody. I know my counterparts north and south of me, respectively, Sheriff Christensen and Sheriff Mims, wrote a letter to the vice president. Okay, signed off on it, fine, got to him. Again, I go back. I believe in the Second Amendment. I don't think anybody's gun should be taken away. There's nothing to really enforce the law of at this point in time, because these are really, in my humble estimation, just political theater upon which they did some executive orders. Here, another one. It was review standards for gun locks and gun safes. They're already doing that. California has a law for that, okay? Improve incentives for states to share information with background check system. We have a national center, NCIC, National Center for Information, or I forget what the exact acronym is. We already do that. We share. We have WISN, Western States Information Network. We have the State Terrorism Assessment Center up in Sacramento. We have LA Impact. We have so many fusion centers, I can't even keep up with the acronyms. We already got that in place. You go to, should Obama ban guns? Of course not. He can't. It's in the Constitution. And I think what's happened here, some folks are getting baited to go ahead and make them look very, what's the word I'm looking for, unreasonable. So we had this horrible situation, more than one, and as I mentioned, Patrick Purdy, Stockton, California, 1989. I was a sergeant then. You know, we thought, oh my gosh, this loon went to a school in Stockton and shot up the school grounds. Nothing was really done then, even though it was a tragedy. It's
Well, didn't we have the Brady Bill assault weapon ban for a few years here?
yes, and it
And it expired in '04, I believe.
Yes.
And has there been any studies as to whether or not that affected positively or negatively, violent crimes in the country? I mean, has anybody looked at that?
Steve, you know me pretty well, and we have pre and post conversations after we do our radio show. I'm a pretty basic guy. We need to boil this down to a very common denominator. The common denominator is this: background checks are for persons that obey the law. Okay? The crook, the bad guy, is going to go ahead and get a weapon no matter what.
In the secondary market.
Exactly. The person that is not
Doesn't have anything to hide.
well,
Yeah.
the person that is not hitting on all 8 mental cylinders, if he or she is going to go off hook, they're going to find a way to stab, choke, beat. Here's the deal, and I hate to bring this up because it just breaks my heart. The Carpenter kids were killed by a mentally disturbed person with a pitchfork. It was not a gun. Our deputies went and engaged that guy and killed him. We killed him. We went in. We were doing active shooter methodology before it was even in vogue, okay? So when people start to challenge me that, we're not doing our part, that you're not standing up, let me tell you something. When a person is going to go and kill, whether it's multiple persons, one person, whatever the case is, they are going to do it. Now, the instant rebuttal to that, well, AK-47 will mow down a bunch of people. I got that. But if you do it in a very methodical, with a plan, scheme, and design, you're going to knock off as many persons as you can, whether it's through a axe, a pitchfork. So to stop some of this violence, it's going to take, I guess, a lot of work.
And it's not about restricting gun access per se.
No. And this is why I think, when you get these polarized views, it's about guns. No, it's not.
Well, you've got the extremes, like you said, being I don't want to say baited because
I think they are. I really have to go on the
Yeah.
record. They're getting baited because here's what's going on. If I was trying to be a neutral observer from the sterile environment of 30,000 feet, if I keep poking and prodding Steve into making you look overzealous and do this demagoguery thing, then I'm going to use you as a litmus test. See, these are the gun rights folks. Conversely, I go over here and get more of these persons that are more passive and then they'll do something silly. Then I'll be able to use them as an example. See, look at them. I mean, they just want to ban everything from AK-47s to a butter knife. How silly is that?
Right, and those are the extremes.
Exactly.
That they want to ban everything from an AK-47 to a butter knife. To the other extreme is that any restriction on any weapon is the first step towards completely taking the citizens' guns away from them.
Correct. I'm not saying for a minute that we should not be diligent and observant in what happens in Congress and at the presidential level, okay? Again, I want to preface this because I know you're going to get phone calls afterwards or maybe get some emails. I am a lifelong member of the National Rifle Association. My uncle, Tom Margaretti, got me into guns, and my dad and brothers, we used to go hunting. I get it. I mean, I carry a gun as a tool, Glock 40 caliber. I got it. But everybody needs to take a breath and not get whipped into a frenzy, because all that does is just feed into these passions and raw emotions of what occurred. Again, I know I'm reiterating myself. There is a number of incidents where innocent people have been killed, and I'm sad to say it'll probably happen again.
Yeah.
Okay?
The dynamic that I'm finding very interesting in all this is we had attorney David Thielen on.
Yeah,
He's a
Dave.
constitutional attorney here locally.
Uh-huh.
And we were talking about the legalities of it all and about the way the Supreme Court to date has defined what self-defense is and where they might take that in the future. And we discussed that currently there was a case, and I can't remember for the life of me, the Heller law, which said that that the core root of the right to bear arms is based on self-defense.
Right.
And at this point, you have the right. The court has said you have the right to defend yourself in your home with a weapon. They haven't defined the weapon, but they have said a pistol is acceptable because that's the case they ruled on. And what David was explaining is they can't rule on anything beyond that. They can only deal with what's in front of them. And the definition of what self-defense is and what paradigm that will take on in the future. And one example they used is self-defense against foreign invaders. If we were to be invaded, because
Right.
the wholesale constitution of the reading of the Second Amendment in the Constitution is that you are to be armed against foreign invasion, against civil usurpation. If the government gets out of control,
Right.
that if you read the Second Amendment literally, that's what it says.
Correct.
So if the Supreme Court were to say yes, self-defense of our nation falls within the self-defense perimeter, so that you need to be armed in case someone invades us from a foreign country, at that point, me personally, I would want a high-powered, high-capacity laser scope, grenade launcher, whatever I would need to save my life against a foreign invader,
Right.
versus a weapon to defend myself against a home intruder.
Right.
And that's what fascinates me, is what the definition of self-defense is going to become in this country.
Right.
And until those cases are put before the Supreme Court, which this assault weapon ban might be a blessing in disguise, because finally the Supreme Court might be able to rule on the definition of self-defense, because self-defense is the core of the Second Amendment.
Right.
And that is what's fascinating to me. But then on the other extreme, we had some gentlemen in the conversation that said, the right to bear an arm is a God-given right. It's our right as human beings, and they even cited the Exodus in the Bible. I think that's a part of the Bible. I'm not super familiar with it, but they go back to biblical times before the country was even founded, that said a human right has a right to defend themselves with whatever they choose. And they even went as far as to say, if you can afford to park a tank in your driveway or buy an F-14 fighter, that's within the parameters of what your God-given right is to defend yourself as you see fit to defend yourself with whatever weapon you would like to have.
Right.
And again, those are the range of conversations that we've been having.
Right.
But the one that fascinates me most is the legality of it. Because the fact of the matter is if you believe that having a weapon of your choice to defend yourself is a God-given right, I think that we live in a society now where we're defining what the Constitution means on a regular basis, and what's going to go in front of the Supreme Court in the near future, hopefully, because we were talking about this, and Mr. Thielen even said that he hopes this happens in his lifetime. So this is not something I think is going to be, coming around the corner the next year or two. But there's going to come a point in our country where we have to define what self-defense is.
Correct.
And that's what's fascinating to me.
I think it boils down to a very basics. If you are confronted by an intruder and you fear for your life and the safety of others, you have to take some action, okay? Regardless if it's at your house, on a street. But here's where it gets squishy. And I get very concerned about the interpretation, reinterpretation, and all the iterations thereof, that you, Steve, are being attacked. You have your gun, but the intruder was only using a fist, okay? As opposed to maybe a knife or a 2x4 or even had a gun. It's just fists. How is that person, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, all of a sudden you get attacked. Okay, so what? So you killed the guy because he hit you with a fist?
Yeah.
And so now that's all in the eyes of the beholder. And that's why I'm with the good counselor Dave here, what is self-defense? Where does it meet that threshold? Law enforcement has a higher hurdle when it comes to that's where we're always getting drug into court.
I think the devil's advocate argument to your devil's advocate argument would be that it's good for our society for crooks to know that if they infringe on someone's personal property, they do it under the threat of death, no matter if they have a knife, a fist, or anything else. That if you choose to break into another man's property, that you could be shot dead for that offense, regardless of what you bring with you.
Let me redo.
Devil's advocate to the devil's advocate to the devil's advocate.
I will take that devil's advocate and I'll raise you 2 more devil's advocates. And we have nearly 500 persons on death row who could give a rat's ass whether they killed anybody at the time and whether they sit on death row. You've got Scott Peterson, who we know killed his pregnant wife out of Modesto. You've got Stefan Gray, who admittedly was killed by Tal Rivera.
Yeah.
Stefan Gray was killed by Tal Rivera. He said that he admittedly killed Stefan Gray, a police officer. He's sitting on death row. So I raise you that devil's advocate while they sit over on death row going through these stupid appeals. Those persons should have been given a hot load about 2 years ago and start the process. And I'm not trying to be overly facetious. I'm not trying to be draconian, but it is what it is. So when you say under penalty that you're going to face the Huskow and that you're going to be swinging from the end of a rope, these people don't care because they know it's never going to happen. Just not going to happen.
Well, it might happen on the spot if someone picks up their gun, regardless if they have a fist or a knife or anything else, and shoots them dead on their property.
And then guess what happens?
Then the guy that probably shoots them dead gets in trouble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
so
then
right?
you go from constitutional lawyer Dave Thalen to finding a defense attorney because now you're getting sued. Look what happened here, and we'll go back. There was a gal that I was watching the news, or I read it in one of the local papers, USA Today. A local gal out of Nevada went on Match.com, got hooked up with a guy. He stabbed her multiple times, almost killed her. She's suing Match.com for $10 million. So here's what I deal with every day. You can sue anybody, anytime for anything.
Yeah.
As long as you've got an attorney and you've got the retainer of whatever it is nowadays, and you can get into court, you're on the hot seat. I can't even tell you how many times. How can this even be?
Right.
But the judges allow it because talk about Constitution, that's a constitutional right to sue somebody when you're aggrieved.
Yep. That's also kind of absurd that people try to write laws for things they know nothing about.
Exactly.
And that's another thing we were talking about earlier with a different interview with Mr. Thalen. But we're out of time, my brother.
What?
Is there anything
I'm
else?
ready to get warmed up.
Well, you'll be back next week.
I want John Pedroso's time.
You'll be back next week.
All right.
Anything you need to get out before I let you go?
No. Real quickly, who's the baseball pitcher?
Jeremy Affeldt, I believe.
He's speaking at Gateway Church. I want to put a plug in for that. I'll be there. In fact, I donated some tickets to Dave Luna on the 97.5 side. So hopefully somebody will catch that if they want to go.
And when is that?
That's Saturday evening.
The 26th?
The 26th,
okay.
Yes.
So if you're listening to this Saturday morning, it's tonight. If you catch us on Sunday, it was last night.
Yeah, exactly. Don't we air also on Saturday afternoon? Or did you cut me out of that one too?
No, you're Saturday morning and Sunday afternoon.
I thought it was Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon.
You thought wrong.
Well, you need to get that card. You need to redo that too. I'm paying good money to be here.
You know what time it kicks off?
7 p.m.
7 p.m. at Gateway Church?
Yes.
Saturday night.
On Donna. Yeah, just down from Rayleigh's. So.
Sounds good, my brother.
Okay, buddy.
I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Stand for.
All right, next week.
Yeah.
Merced County's news voice since 1936. News Talk 1480, KYOS, Merced.